Of course, thank you all. Oh, hello. Hi. So thank you all for making time to chat with me and being a part of this conversation that I know will be really insightful. So I wrote a book and I'm really excited to share it with the world. It's called From Foster Care to College, Navigating Challenges and Creating Possibilities. The book really is a culmination of the work that I've been doing for the last decade aimed at improving the material conditions of young people who are most systemically marginalized by our systems, whether it be education, juvenile justice, child welfare system, et cetera, and how those systems work in tandem in ways that oppress young people. And this book is really chronicling young people's experiences in care and the path and journey to college. And so I wanted to chat with people who have worked on the ground, who are advocates, who are experts, and who know much more about this topic than I, to really amplify some of the sort of issues within our state of California, which we know has the largest foster care population in the country. So maybe we can start off by you just telling me a little bit about who you are, first what your name is, and the work that you've been doing in the space.
Sure, Dr. Johnson. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And again, I'm excited to talk a little bit about your phenomenal book. My name is Alain Datcher. I'm the former executive director of the Los Angeles County Youth Commission. We were launched in 2020, right after the height of the pandemic, to represent the voices and experiences of LA County's almost 30,000+ young people impacted by the child welfare and the juvenile justice systems collectively. Our mission is to impact and make sure that every single county agency, department keeps in mind the voices, the experiences, and really is led by and informed by those closest to the impacts of the child welfare and those juvenile justice systems. So every program, service, and policy that impacts you should be informed by those very same youth. And so since 2020, we've been doing just that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your work. How about you?
Hey, I'm Alexis Obinna, and simply put, I'm just a connector. I got my bachelor's in social work from Cal State LA, and from there, I kind of felt like there was a need in my community, and I always felt like I needed to support my people and my community. I came from not the same way that most people enter into foster care, but I was underserved, and I made a vow to myself that I'd be there to serve myself and my community. And so I do a lot of advocacy. I do a lot of connecting of resources, a lot of resource gathering, and just a lot of protecting of people.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for your work. And last,
Let's go.
yes.
My name is Tay Thompson, full name Demontae Thompson, the executive director of Twinspire. Together we inspire, a nonprofit created and by my twin brother and I. It was really, the impetus was, came out of our personal experience in foster care. We emancipated out of care. We were in college, and many of our peers were navigating college as if, they were familiar with the place. For us as first gen, former foster youth, we sort of had to figure things out. And one thing we did, we said, hey, we're going to make a vow to our community in Compton. We're going to make a vow to all of LA to ensure that they are providing with or they receive life skills training. And so we created Twinspire 2019, right before the pandemic. And now I'm happy to say that we're in, STRTPs across LA County, juvenile facilities, and also schools. So that's a little bit, half of who I am. The other half is I'm a doctoral student at UCLA studying the educational outcomes of Black males, formerly in foster care.
Yes. Future doctor, sir.
Future doctor. Yes.
So one of the things I was really excited about in this conversation is that all of you all have lived experience in the foster care system. Talk to me a little bit about how that experience cultivated your sort of passion for advocacy in this space. You talked a little bit earlier about the importance of youth voice and policy decision making. How did your sort of voice and experiences in care shape your own sort of advocacy today?
Yeah, Royel. Well, I mean, simply put, and how I like to summarize it, I think I come to this work primarily because after experiencing the foster care system, I told myself I never wanted another young person, especially my younger brothers who were still in the system, to experience it the exact same way I did.
Yeah.
And so that put me on a path early on, especially for my educational goals, to say, how do I find the most effective way to advocate to make sure my younger brothers who were still in the system did not have to experience that? And that brought me to the fields of social work, but also public policy, government, and I eventually went on to get degrees in that. But specifically, I think, I entered the foster care system at age 11 and I emancipated at age 18. And this was still before extended foster care was passed here, AB 12 here in California. And so I remember the last day that essentially I was still a foster kid considered by the state. And I remember my social worker was fairly new. She really didn't even know the whole process of, how to sign paperwork, but I had been in foster care so long that I knew it step by step. And so she handed me my last check. She asked me to sign these papers, and that was it. And I didn't see her as a social worker anymore. Essentially, we dissolved that relationship. And I was, a freshman in college at that time, and just figuring out, wow, okay, I have to figure out how to navigate this. And so I think that experience is really what led me to say, how do I continue to find the paths in order to advocate more effectively, which brought me to public policy and then working in government in order to shift from the inside out.
So I want to put a pin there before I invite you all into the conversation, because you talked about emancipating from care. And I think there are a lot of people who don't understand the distinctions between being pushed out of the foster care system, generally at age 18, although most states have extended care at this point. But talk more about that experience, when most folks aren't even prepared to, get dressed by themselves, but let alone, navigate life as an adult at age 18 without the sort of traditional family support that some families may have, some kids may have.
Yeah. Well, I don't think one size will fit all from your emancipation or exiting foster care experience. I think it's as diverse as the people who experience it. But generally speaking, I think emancipating is a kind of a policy and a legal decision to say this young person will no longer be recognized as a ward of the court or as in the care of the government generally, but instead they are now legally required full-fledged adults to be on their own. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is, what young person do we know if they were in a nuclear family can say at age 18 or at this one age, we dissolve all of our relationships, whether it's support, connections, resourcing, you name it. And so it's peculiar to think that these young people that have this legal jurisdiction at some point will just be cut off. And it's almost unnatural the way that we almost treat our young people who have gone through the system. They still need connections, right? They still need resourcing. They still need supports from a variety of services. And when we make those decisions, even legally, on paper, it's a drastic impact to the minds and I think to the social realities of our young people.
Absolutely, yeah. How about you, Tay?
I'll ask the first question, then I'll go on to the second. The first question around how did I get into this work? What about my personal experience? I think there are many, and what we found in research too, in our youth participatory action research at UCLA that's coming out shortly, what we found is that many young people have this social justice ethos. They're using their experiences to really shift the power within the systems that they're in. And now we are finding sort of like a more emphasis on the lived experience of young people, right? So during our time going in foster care, there was often this, pathologizing. There was this, sort of exploitation of, if you can come to my gala and tell us about your experience. There's been more of a shift. We can give you something now, and your voice is necessary and needed in these situations. For me, I knew that early on. I was, I thought I was going to be a Denzel. I was ready to act. I went to Cal State Northridge. I'm like, we close to Hollywood. And it didn't work out. I tried out for a few plays, didn't work out. And I said, I got to do something else. Business management, learned how to do everything. I'm talking resumes, cover letters, all leadership, everything. And I say, you know what? Every single foster youth should have a chance to learn these things. And so when I graduated, I was impacted and influenced by my mentors who were at Cal State Northridge. And I called them my mommy mentors because they served as other mothers on my campus when my uncle passed away just shy of our graduation. And they inspired me to go into student affairs. So I went to USC, studied student affairs, and started working at a college. And there is when I realized that I was a part of the system that was broken and I wasn't doing anything about it. So I'm creating programs and services. We're having a good time and we're assessing the needs. We're assessing if these programs and services really impact the young people, but they were still dropping out at alarming rates. So I said, how are Black and Latino foster youth here at this college dropping out at these rates with no type of support?
Well, let me reply, because there are a couple of things that stood out in your experience. And the first is that we often treat young people in care as if they are completely and wholly deficient, right? And one of the things that I tried to do in the book was to center the agency, autonomy, the aspirations, the hopes of young people in care without sort of treating them as sort of just empty and sort of needing fixing, right? The second thing you mentioned is around chosen family, right? The other mothering that you experienced. And one of the things that I picked up very clearly in the book is that, when you think about defining family, family is not just the people you are born with, right? It is the people who choose to be within your community, who you choose to be in that community. And there's lots of capital that young people derive from those relationships to pursue higher education. Alexis,
Hey.
how did your experience in care shape your advocacy and the work that you've been doing?
Yeah. So I'm a little bit of a hood princess. How would I say?
Yes, you do.
So I was going to Northridge and came up a little bit more fluid. But then when I came into foster care, I learned what poverty looks like. I was raised in the jungles. And so being born in Northridge, coming up in like private school and then being thrown in the jungles and seeing like real gang violence, and like going to school and being scared to walk to school are just like two different worlds. Also being biracial and also just being a social worker and being a foster youth and navigating this world. You talked about your experience. I feel like sometimes it's easy to get caught up in like, my specific experience and how I live. But we got to think about other people and our brothers and sisters that even now, like with older foster youth and younger foster youth, it's like, well, I should have got that when I was younger, but we still need to fight for people no matter what we got or what we didn't got. And like, it is that trauma that it's like, I wish I could have got that, but we can't oppress people because we didn't get it and we had different traumas. And so just based off my experience and foster care, I've been able to kind of look at the world differently, kind of be able to see the different points and different perspectives of people. I really used to say that I wish I could do networking in school because I love to talk to people. I love to learn about why do you think this way? Why do you feel this way? Even if they don't have the same views as me, it's very important to talk to those people because this is how we learn and grow from each other. And I've learned that in advocacy. And I've been those people in the room where I feel like I can't speak up. And that's why I want to urge people to advocate more because it is hard to speak up when you feel like maybe you're the only person speaking up or you're the only one who has something to say, or maybe it's an opposing view, but you never know what comes out of that conversation. So just being in foster care has really taught me to not be silent, to not really care about what people think, and to just kind of be me. Like, I'm a Black girl who loves metal in LA. Like, that's so random. And people kind of put me down to like you have your bachelor's in social work, you work for the county, you work for different places, you work for nonprofits, you work for philanthropy, you work for consulting. Why don't you sit down and do one thing? But I don't want to. I want to show people that you don't have to commit to one thing. You can still explore your options. You can be a free agent and do what you love. So that's what foster care has really taught me.
So I want to reply to a couple of things. One, Tay, you mentioned the social justice ethos. I've interviewed now at least 100 young people in foster care across the country, and that social justice ethos is always present. Whether they want to be a lawyer, whether or not they want to be a social worker or get an MBA and work in business, So many young people who I talk to are motivated to change circumstances and conditions for people who come behind them. But I'm also like struck by the conscious raising that many of them were keenly aware of like systemic inequities of being in the foster care system, whether it was being a queer youth, whether it was not being accepted by their foster family because of their identities and having to move across placement changes. Would you say that you all were sort of aware of like the disadvantage in terms of the system, not just sort of the circumstance of being in foster care, but the ways in which the system was not always working well for you?
Yeah, I was 15. My brother's 8. Well, my brother was 8 and my sister was 2, 3, something like that. And again, that's why I kind of brought up being a Black girl who loves metal music, like going through that emo phase in like 2000s. Like I had like the bangs, I had like the football shirt, like there really wasn't anything you could tell me, right? But when you see a 15-year-old like Black girl, like the cinched hair, you're like, who is this girl? Like, I don't know what kind of, and I've heard people tell me, even my brother and sister's adopted parents, when I was older, like, oh, we didn't know what kind of problems you had. And you were older, but did you ask me? Did you assume or did you just ask me? And so when I was young at 15, I had to make the decision to either continue trying to find an adoptive placement for my brother, sister, and I, or sever that tie and allow them to get adopted and me to continue going through the foster care system. And I'm glad I made the decision to sever and go through it alone. But again, that's like creating that family separation. Yeah. And I felt alone, but I feel like it, again, propelled me to be that advocate, propelled me to be like, no, I want to see my brothers and sisters. And that's what made me work at California Youth Connection, because we talk about the Bill of Rights. We say, hey, no, it's a right for me to see my siblings. It's a right for me to talk on the phone with my siblings. Yeah. It's a right for me to even take the bus to go see them. So just making sure that people know their rights. And yeah.
It's powerful. Yeah. So... and just paralleling, I think, to some of the stories that you highlighted in your book, Royel, I think it was the story of either Amara and Mark who kind of interacted with their social worker. Yeah. And when you talk about, the social justice need, I think one of the very first, experiences that probably is shared by many of the folks that you highlighted in the stories in your book was the fact that they all had some type of interaction with the system. And usually the system, sometimes we talk about it in these terms, that it is people. It's people. It's people. And right. It is right. It is people. And so my experiences with people early on in the system were not good. Mm-hmm. Later on, they were immensely important and so much better. And even to Tay's earlier point about, mother figures that supported him, I was able to fill in the gaps that the system and that really the individuals that I experienced that really were spurring on this need to right these wrongs with the love, with permanency from phenomenal mother-like figures. I call it strategic surrogacy, where I was like, okay, you can be my surrogate dad or surrogate mom, and it fit these gaps. And they were able to then help grow, help heal, where then my vision went from not just changing the system to prevent harm, but really what could I do to actually improve, right wrongs? What voice could I actually bring to the table here? The last thing I'll say is, over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, and again, you highlight this in your book, there's been a need to include the voices and the experiences of young people, from the poverty pimping and, this transactional need from young people's experiences to actually now welcoming and really even requiring that those experiences be forefront, right? And I've experienced the system, therefore I really am probably the most qualified to help shape and lead the system. Absolutely. The difficulty, though, is the system in and of itself, child welfare at large and locally, still has to catch up to that. That's still fairly new, right? And so in many of these spaces, I was the very first systems impacted person in leadership that had to then be a peer with a social worker. So I was no longer receiving these services. That was a very different power dynamic shift. And in order for us to really continue to try to grow, we also have to continue to address that in our system, a lot of times there's still some historical deficiencies in who gets power, agency, which you highlight, and whose voices are actually championed in the system. many times social workers, child welfare directors, this may be the very first time they're actually peers in listening to folks with lived experience in a non-transactional way, where we are actually driving and leading change. And so I think when you talk about a social justice bit, that's where I'm trying to be focused. That's what we did at the Youth Commission. That's what we continue to do. I know there's advocacy organizations like Alexis's and others trying to push the envelope on the biggest equity is providing a mirror back to the system and saying, hold on, where are the gaps now, right? Invite lived experience, but we need to lead with that lived experience as well.
So California is a unique context, right? We have the nation's largest foster care population in the state. Talk about some of the unique challenges in the state and in Los Angeles in particular, where we know the homeless population is overrepresented with young people with foster care experience who are formerly incarcerated, who are people of color, who are LGBTQIA. What are some of the challenges specific to the state of California and even just the local area of Los Angeles?
Yeah, I think all of us could agree that homelessness is one of the top challenges, not only for foster youth, but for Los Angeles and California. There was an article in the LA Times that came out a few days ago that mentioned how many foster kids or youth who were formerly in foster care are experiencing homelessness. They said, I don't know, or nobody knows, right? And so there's no tracking, there's no sort of intentional hand-holding. There's no metrics that are used to provide and ensure that youth are transitioning from the system to, I wouldn't coin a new phrase, community sufficiency rather than self-sufficiency, depending on themselves when they should have relationships and connections with, folks in the community who are doing good work, such as, the Alliance for Children's Rights, who are behind, the lawsuit that's going on right now to ensure that foster youth are being protected as it pertains to housing and other services, along with 3 other law firms. And so for me, the way that I think about it is that, what are they doing that's working? What are they doing that's not working? And if we had a conversation with current foster youth, they will give you every single thing that they enjoy, every single thing that is not pleasant for them. And in what ways can we use that, that knowledge, that expertise to really shift the system? Dorothy Robert talks about, abolishing the family regulation system, the family policing system.
Which to some folks seems like a really radical idea. Like, what do you say to that? Like, people talk about foster care as a family separation system, right? Non-delivering on its sort of promise to provide care and safety. But what do we think about it as like abolishing? How do you respond to that recommendation?
The way that I respond to the abolition movement within the child welfare space is I'm behind it for the simple fact that the same reasoning and the same push that we have for slavery and many other sort of like carceral punitive systems that have existed in the past, we've had these very, sort of like beautiful ideas of what the future could hold for us. And I think abolition is about opportunity and possibility. But I like to see more research around what does that possibility look like and how do young people lead in those possibilities?
Yeah.
For me, I was placed in foster care, but it was a kinship care placement. So I was with my late great uncle. And now there's a lot of, policy, and I'm sure Alan can speak to the policy surrounding kinship care being one of the most promising, ways of keeping young people connected to their culture, their community, and also providing that, racial identity support and other services. And so if we know that kinship care is something that's promising, that has been working in the past, if we know that disproportionately Black youth and Indigenous youth are being taken away from their homes forcibly, right, and oftentimes negligence is conflated with poverty, then we know that we have a poverty issue. We know that, Dr. King said there's nothing new about poverty, but what is new now is that we have the resources to do something about it. We have the capabilities of doing something about it, but we haven't seen those. No one's doing those. And I think that the work that we're doing here today is calling this to question and also highlighting the asset-based perspectives and resiliency of these young people. Not to say, hey, this young person got through these systems, all of them can. Not to say that, but to say, hey, what can we learn from these navigational, capital that these young people have to be able to ensure that the systems are not harmful. Right. They're supporting, they're not mandated reporting, they're mandating supporting these young people, as Dr. Howard would say. And so I think we have to be not only intentional about the ways in which that we're changing and thinking about changing child welfare, but also the ways in which we're changing the education system. Yeah. The ways in which that we're changing our ideas about family writ large. Yes. Right. And so if it comes down to it, I love to think about and envision, and maybe we'll get to this question at the end about what does it look like to actually create a system that is, not what Dorothy Roberts called a benevolent terror, but that is an intentional family.
I love it. I mean, our systems don't talk, right? What's happening in education is never aligned with what's happening in the child welfare system. And in the book, I write about some of the tensions of a system that purports to provide care and support, contrasts with the story of Ma'Khia Bryant, young Black woman, 16-year-old young Black youth in Columbus, Ohio. And this story was particularly important to me because I worked with Franklin County Children's Services in Columbus, Ohio for a number of years when I was at Ohio State. And she calls the police to, she was in a fight. Right. Her also siblings in the house, and police came. They immediately used gun violence to neutralize the situation. She was killed because they saw her wanting a knife, right? But when the New York Times report, there have been numerous 911 calls from this house for over the past year. Wow. Instantiating concerns around safety and security, right? So how is it that young people get placed in situations that are in fact more harmful in the situations that they were pulled out of? That's some of the tension I think Dorothy Roberts is writing about, and other scholars who are trying to really problematize the idea of child welfare, right? Is it actually providing welfare to young people?
Yeah. To that point, I think it's truly an indictment on the child welfare system as a whole that we've continued to use very similar approaches to our criminal justice system as we have.
Well, I say criminal punishment
system, right? In so many cases, right? It parallels how we have treated families in crisis, is how I see it. And it's very true of my story. Both my parents are deceased now, but I recall how difficult it was for my father, who struggled with substance abuse, and my mother, who also struggled with substance abuse and mental health disorders, to see me, to meet their requirements. It was extremely carceral for my father, right? He had no voting rights after being incarcerated. He had no ability to get educational benefits, welfare benefits, in order to get himself back to a place where he can even see us, right? So visitation rights were non-existent even for the first year that we were removed. These are true stories. That was an extremely carceral time. Now, he was able to navigate through that, and navigation, we cannot just focus on the young person in crisis. This is an entire family, potentially it's an entire extended family that is experiencing crisis when that young person is in there. Ma'Khia Bryant is one core example. I wonder how many crises she experienced in her family and the other young people in that home experience up until that critical point. And so I think, now that I'm on the technology side of child welfare and really trying to improve the systems, I am very concerned that we still heavily rely on people in this human services system, and that there are so many great tools and technologies to use to track data, to track information, to communicate effectively, to advise more effectively, to use resources more strategically, that we still are yet to explore. And so my goal is to really try to counteract that with what are resources and tools that we can use to help and support the phenomenal social workers out there, the great families, the kinship parents who are trying and standing on the front lines, who don't get any credit a lot of times, right? Those are the things that I continually am struggling with when we look at our system locally.
Alexis, what are some bright spots? What are some programs, some initiatives, some new policy practices that seem to be responsive, that seem to be working that you can tell us about?
Yeah. So just on my side, I don't 100% believe in abolition only because I definitely needed to be removed from my house. But I do believe that there are many, many services that support this. Some services that help are just talking to DCFS. DCFS, they're actually really cool. Like, if you talk to enough higher level folks, they really do want to support people and talk to individuals. And so I've been working with the Opportunity Youth Collaborative at the Alliance for Children's Rights, and they're starting a new TAY unit. And so through that, they're going to do some really comprehensive work on moving some of the ILP workers into a new branch and supporting people into the transition of getting housing, because they have FYI vouchers, foster initiative that the county holds, and HUD and some other folks also have their hands in it. And like you guys are saying, there's certain program, what do you call them, like tools, certain computer operating programs, what I'm thinking of, that people need to use in order to get on them. And it's really interesting that when we talk to foster youth, they often say that they have to have the highest score, give the most darkest parts of their life to get put on this tool. And then nobody knows where the information is going. That doesn't make sense. But there are also the National Foster Youth Institute who are doing a lot of work around housing, mental health, juvenile justice youth. And there's another one I'm missing, but they have policies that they're also working and talking to Mayor Bass and also DCFS and some other folks.
Who has a longstanding commitment to young people.
Absolutely. Very fast. Absolutely.
Yeah. And say other bright spots.
Yeah, I would say, and I could be remiss if I didn't mention my own organization. But at Twinspire, running Twinspire is such an incredible opportunity, because what it is that we had a vision of providing life skills training to young people. And what we learned is that there was not only this yearning for this type of information, right, in and outside of school. What we learned was that many of the young people had a stable understanding of their finances. They needed some support and care around decision making and making the best choices. But overall, we were thinking to ourselves, in what ways, instead of just providing, support in these ways with the workshops, allowing them to become the teachers, so training them to become the facilitators, to ensure that we're building a cycle, that we're spreading this type of knowledge to in some ways address poverty.
Yep.
In many ways, be able to allow young people to learn how to, best utilize the resources that are in front of them. And we know about SILP and with AB 12 and the money that young people receive. There should not be almost 50% of young people who are exiting care in homelessness when they're getting some resources. And the resources are not nearly enough to provide for housing across LA. But I would say that with Twinspire, we meet the young people where they are. We actually go to them. We're in STRTPs in the Antelope Valley, Sworth. We go to Watts, and we're in the community. But furthermore, one thing I appreciate about Twinspire is not only the work that we're doing with financial literacy, social emotional learning, and the other services we provide with career development, but the other thing is sort of the fun community building experiences where young people didn't have the chances to be a part of, sports and, become athletes, where many of them in our research have found that the young people who have sort of the sports, experience have built camaraderie, built leadership skills, and have succeeded. And so for us, we create those type of environments. Another organization I would think about is Los Angeles Room and Board. They are, this innovative, organization that has really thought about homelessness in another perspective, particularly transition age youth, in another perspective. Many of you are probably familiar with Los Angeles Room and Board. And that particular organization, their mission is to eradicate homelessness and hunger for college students. And that involves even our most marginalized youth. And I think that becoming a leader and providing housing services, and
it's a beautiful place.
A beautiful place. We're not talking about the basics of the basic. No, we're not talking about the luxuries. What it is, shipping, the small homes. We're talking free accommodations for young people, of which they deserve. They deserve.
He talks about it as like dignity affirming sort of places. Like, what does it mean to live in a place that I'm proud of and I'm excited to be in? It's the ethos of it makes you want to enjoy it and be there.
You want to add?
Yeah, go ahead.
What you're saying. I also want to add, shout out, and also people should look into Watson Consulting Group. Have the
Washington Consulting.
Watson.
So, okay.
They have the TAY Action Board or TAY, and so they work with nonprofits, philanthropists, county folks, and others. And yeah, they also did. When they talked about SILT. And on the state level, so Gavin Newsom, he kind of rolled back his promise to foster youth. And so we had to do a lot of advocacy for that. And I am very proud. I wasn't a part of this, but I was part of the group. So I'm very proud to say that they did actually say that they will give SILT more money to SILT to the SILT payment, but it won't be till like 2026. So
yeah. That's interesting. One other org I would like to mention is Children's Institute. It's a huge organization that does work with schools and communities, and their vision is to become a hub for foster youth and families and children across the dimensions of where they're at. They're in Compton, they're in Watts, they're in Long Beach, and Echo Park. And so we're co-located with Children's Institute, and which is incredible because whenever their young people are meeting with therapists, they recommend our services and they come down and speak with us about either, want to shoot the breeze or want to talk about budgeting, want to talk about what savings account has the highest APR. We got all the strategies and are able to sort of have like this holistic type of support, right? This sort of like 8 dimensions of wellness surrounded by young people when they're either in care or when they're out of care.
I guess one organization I want to highlight is called Foster Nation. It was founded by Maggie Lynn. I'm on after this. Oh, awesome. And I'm on the board of Foster Nation, and it's a phenomenal organization. I think their model is CareerX, but it was formerly CareerX. Now it's Sparks, but essentially it pairs a current or former foster youth with a coach for professional development.
Got it.
And for several months, it teaches them not only just phenomenal life skills, but also really walks alongside the young person with that one coach, permanent colleague, mentor, in order to provide them economic workforce development, strategic services, and get them to that place where, again, once they emancipate or if they've already aged out, that they really can get gainful employment, housing, other services.
So last question. For people who are watching this video, who don't know much about the foster care system, but learned a little bit through this conversation, what's 1 or 2 things that they can do to get involved in this fight, to take action within their local community, within their sphere of influence? What's something that they should know and arm themselves with in order to join this fight?
I can go first. When I think about people who are interested in sort of joining this fight or getting involved in a positive way, or I think about prevention. I don't think about getting involved in adopting a young person and, fostering or creating although those are needs, I think about what does it take for families and communities to support a family who's struggling to prevent that young person from being taken away and placed in a stranger's care, and that stranger being paid to take care of them when the money should have been provided for the family who's in need and the resources. And so when I think about, how people can get involved, I say checking in on their neighbors. For me and my faith, we're called to sort of, love your neighbor. But I think we should take it a little bit further now. We've gotten a little distant from each other and are, sort of in some ways toxic around what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And I believe that we need to lean heavy into, ensuring that our neighbors are getting the support that they need.
I guess I asked that question because there's an old stat that I used to reference. Roughly 1 in 3 adults have no clue about issues related to the foster care system, right? And part of the reason why issues related to systemic injustice in care perpetuate is because the vast majority, it's not even a hot button topic on the election, right? So like, what is it that people need to know about this in order to even just be a bit more responsible citizens and to know what's happening with young people in their community? I mean, I hear you in terms of checking on your neighbors, there's a prevention aspect of it, but what are some other things?
Yeah, I would just say, this is from my lens as the former executive director of the LA County Youth Commission. I think that there needs to be, everyone can do this, especially adults, advocate on behalf of young people. Ask if your local government has a youth advisory body, or do they even have a position on the status of young people? More often than not, they don't. That can touch every person right now, right? If you are an adult and you are a taxpayer, most likely your dollars are going to impact young people in some way, shape, or form, right? 1 in 3 people here in LA County are considered between the ages of 0 and 18. So they are young people. And so although many of them don't have the opportunity to vote and impact government systems, they are heavily impacted by those decisions. So I would ask everyone to potentially look and ask, how is it that your organization, your local agencies, your local government is impacting and serving young people? If you can't articulate that, if your government doesn't articulate that, then I would say maybe at your next school board meeting, city council meeting, board of supervisors meeting, maybe ask that question. Is there a position? Is there a viewpoint on how to support young people locally? That will trickle down more often than not to how they support systems impacting young people for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Any final recommendations?
Yeah. As a true anthropologist, just education. I know that we feel like in this world we're very busy, but there's more than enough community events to get connected, to talk to people, to check in on your neighbor. There's more than enough independently sourced information, not my HBO documentary or I did foster care life. I'm talking about this right here. I'm talking about the stuff that Trey, Tay, Alan, all of us have been on, and checking out Twinspire, checking out some of these places that we are really talking about and really educating yourself on what's going on. You talk about like mentor support and stuff. Some people want a mentor, but they don't know what it all encompasses.
Sure.
There's a mentor nexus in LA led by Dr. Ortiz. Like, go to that as a community partner, learn what are the challenges facing foster youth, because they talk about it. And then you can see, do I want to be a mentor? Sometimes people just jump into it and go like, oh my God.
Me not to be a mentor.
And then like stigmatize foster youth because that one youth was going through something that they couldn't handle. And so I just really cannot stress enough that people need to do proper education, especially when it comes to statistics, because I just got on a little internet tit about this because people are like, oh, well, I work in this, and they're saying that, well, people are like, I work in Skid Row, and so drugs are like one of the main reasons of homelessness, or I work over here and this is one of the main reasons of homelessness. But you need to look at all of LA County, not just the different pockets, because that's how we're creating these narratives.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. It's an honor to be in community with you all. Thank you for engaging in this. And I think that's a wrap.
All right.